It was early morning at Westbridge University. The campus was still quiet. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting golden lines through the classroom windows. The long hallways echoed with the soft sound of a broom sweeping the floor. Maya Williams. The janitor moved slowly through the empty math building. She was wearing her gray uniform and old sneakers. Her hair was tied back, and her eyes looked tired but calm. Every morning, before the students and teachers arrived, she cleaned every room, wiping desks, washing the floor, and making sure everything was ready for class. To most people, Maya was invisible, just another face doing a simple job. But what no one knew was that her mind was sharper than most people in that university. As she entered room 204, she stopped for a moment. The whiteboard was full of complex math equations. Someone, maybe the professor, had left a problem half solved on the board. It looked messy, full of symbols and strange numbers. Maya's eyes focused on it. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She picked up the whiteboard marker, hesitated, and then started writing. Step by step, she began solving the equation. Her movements were quick but careful. Every number she wrote had purpose. The sound of the marker moving on the board filled the room. After 5 minutes, the board was filled with her clean handwriting, and at the bottom, a perfect solution. Maya stepped back, looked at her work, and smiled softly. No one had seen her, and she didn't expect anyone to. She just loved solving problems. It made her feel alive. But at that exact moment, the classroom door opened. It was Professor Alan Smith, the head of the mathematics department. He was tall, with neat gray hair and a sharp suit. Everyone on campus knew him. He was brilliant, confident, and also very proud of his title. He believed intelligence belonged only to people like him, educated, well-dressed, and important. When he saw Maya standing near the board, holding the marker, his face changed. "What are you doing?" he asked coldly. Maya froze. I was just cleaning," she said softly, putting the marker down. He looked at the board and frowned. "Did you try to solve that equation?" His tone was mocking. Maya lowered her eyes. I thought I'd give it a try." The professor gave a short, sarcastic laugh. "You? A janitor? Solving calculus?" He shook his head. "You probably don't even know what half these symbols mean." Maya stayed silent. She didn't argue. She just smiled politely, picked up her cleaning cloth, started wiping a desk. Professor Smith stepped closer to the board and stared at the solution. His expression slowly changed. His eyes narrowed. His hand froze on the marker. The answer was right. Every step was logical. Every line made sense. It was perfect. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at it. Then, quickly, he erased the board. His pride wouldn't let him admit that someone like her could be right. "Next time," he said sharply, "just do your job. Leave the math to professionals." And he walked out of the room. Maya stood silently, holding the cloth in her hand. She looked at the empty board. The equations were gone, but inside her mind, they were still glowing. She whispered to herself, "Maybe one day, they'll see." Outside, the students began to fill the hallways. The sound of laughter and footsteps returned. Maya quietly finished her cleaning and left the classroom. But what she didn't know was that Professor Smith, walking back to his office, couldn't stop thinking about that solution. He had been teaching calculus for 20 years, and even he hadn't solved that problem so elegantly. Something inside him felt uneasy. He wanted to prove she was wrong, but deep down, he already knew she wasn't, and that was the beginning of everything. The next morning, Professor Alan Smith sat in his office, staring at a cup of cold coffee. His mind was not on his research papers or the stack of student exams waiting for him. Instead, he kept seeing that clean whiteboard from yesterday. The neat handwriting, the smooth logic, the perfect solution. He had checked it again later, after Maya left. Every calculation was correct. Every step followed precise mathematical rules. Whoever solved it wasn't just good. They were gifted. But how could that be? She was a janitor. The thought kept scratching his mind like a small, sharp stone. At lunch, he told himself it was just luck. Maybe she copied it from somewhere, or maybe it was a coincidence. Yet something deep inside refused to accept that. He decided to test her. The following morning, he arrived on campus earlier than usual. He entered the same classroom Maya always cleaned before the first lecture. On the whiteboard, he wrote a new problem, harder, deeper, one that even graduate students struggled with. He smiled to himself. Let's see how far her luck goes. Then he left, pretending nothing had happened. A few hours later, when he came back, the room was empty, except for the shining floor and a clean whiteboard. His eyes widened. The equation was gone, but not erased. It had been solved again. The answer written below was correct, completely correct. Professor Smith's stomach turned. This was not luck anymore. This was skill, real mathematical brilliance. Over the next few days, he continued his secret experiment. Every morning, he wrote a new, more complex problem on the board before Maya arrived. Every day by the time she left, the problem had been solved neatly, perfectly, and every time his pride took a deeper wound, he began watching her from his office window. Maya always moved quietly, her mop and bucket beside her, headphones sometimes in her ears. She never looked around suspiciously. She never bragged. She just did her job, smiled politely at students, and walked away. But when no one was watching, she became someone else. Someone brilliant. The professor's curiosity slowly turned into frustration. How could someone with no degree, no training, and no position in the academic world solve problems that even he struggled with? He couldn't stand the idea. He, a professor with years of research and papers published, was being outsmarted by a janitor who cleaned his classroom floors. One evening, as he passed through the hallway, he saw Maya sitting alone on a bench, reading a math book. It was thick, full of advanced formulas. He stopped. "Where did you get that?" he asked coldly. She looked up, a bit startled. "From the library," she said simply. "They don't mind if I read after work, you understand that." "I try to," she replied with a small smile. "Math helps me breathe. It makes sense when nothing else does." Her voice was soft but sure. There was no arrogance, no pride, just peace. That calmness irritated him even more. He turned and walked away without another word. By now, Professor Smith's behavior had started to change. His lectures became sharper. His students noticed his irritation. Some whispered that he seemed distracted, even angry at small things. Late one night, sitting in his dark office, he thought of a plan. If Maya really believed she was capable, he would expose her in front of everyone. He wanted to see the look on her face when she failed. He smiled bitterly at the thought. "Let's see how the janitor handles this one," he whispered to himself. The next morning, he wrote a note on his desk calendar. Friday, the challenge. He would make it public. A math question so difficult that no one, not even she, could solve it. But what he didn't know was that this test would not only change Maya's life, it would also destroy the wall of arrogance he had built around his heart for years. And so, the countdown began. 3 days until Friday. 3 days until the world would finally see who Maya Williams really was. Friday morning arrived like a storm that no one could see coming. The sky was bright, but inside the math building there was a strange tension in the air. Students were whispering, papers rustled, Professor Smith's shoes clicked sharply against the floor as he walked toward his classroom. He looked confident, too confident. But behind that calm face, his heart carried a small fire of pride and fear. He had planned this moment carefully. He would expose Maya's luck in front of everyone. That would end his sleepless nights, his doubts, and that strange feeling of being outsmarted by someone he thought was beneath him. When he entered the lecture hall, the students fell silent. He placed his bag on the desk and turned toward the whiteboard. His chalk screeched as he wrote a new equation. Not just any equation, but one that had taken him years to understand. A web of numbers and symbols stretched across the board. Students leaned forward, confused already. Professor Smith turned, smiled slightly and said, "Today we're going to discuss something unusual. But before that, I'd like to invite someone special. The students exchanged puzzled looks. A janitor, the professor continued, who seems to have a very interesting talent. Everyone looked around, surprised. The door opened quietly. It was Maya holding her mop and cleaning cloth. Her face looked calm, but her hands tightened on the handle. "Come in, Maya," Professor Smith said loudly. "Don't be shy. You've impressed me, and I think my class would love to see your skills." Some students laughed softly. Others frowned, uncomfortable. Maya stepped forward slowly, her sneakers making no sound on the floor. She stood near the front desk, looking up at the board filled with symbols. Professor Smith crossed his arms. "Here's a problem I doubt anyone in this room can solve. But since you've shown such confidence lately, maybe you'd like to try?" The words stung, but Maya didn't show it. She took a deep breath. "May I?" she asked quietly. "Go ahead," he said, stepping aside with a smug grin. Maya put down her mop and picked up the chalk. For a moment, she just stared at the problem. The room was silent except for the ticking clock. Then, slowly, her hand began to move. She wrote the first step, and another, then another. The lines grew across the board like a pattern, clean and logical. Every time she paused, whispers filled the air, but she didn't hear them. She was somewhere else, in her world of numbers, logic, and calm rhythm. Professor Smith's smile began to fade. His eyes followed every mark she made. Each line was correct. Each step made sense. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, she wrote the final number, circled it, and put down the chalk. The board was covered with her work, beautiful, organized, and precise. The class sat in total silence. Maya turned toward the professor, her voice steady. "That's the simplest solution I could find." One of the top students, Daniel, blinked in disbelief. "She's right," he whispered. "Every step is perfect." The professor's throat felt dry. He checked the board again, twice. There were no mistakes. He wanted to be angry. What he felt was something he hadn't known in years. Respect. Maya smiled slightly, her eyes gentle. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," she said softly. "I just love solving problems." The room burst into quiet applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. Students stood, clapping for the janitor who had just beaten their professor's impossible question. Maya looked down, almost shy. "If you don't mind, sir," she said, "I should finish my cleaning before the next class." She picked up her mop, nodded politely, and left the room. Professor Smith stood frozen, surrounded by the echo of applause that wasn't for him. His reflection in the classroom window looked smaller than he remembered. For the first time, he began to wonder, had he been teaching math all these years? Or just pride? That evening, after the unforgettable classroom moment, the whole campus buzzed with whispers. Students couldn't stop talking about the janitor who solved a problem even their professor couldn't handle. Some laughed in disbelief. Others felt inspired. But one person couldn't laugh, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking Professor Smith. He sat alone in his office, staring at the same chalkboard where Maya's solution had once stood. His pride had cracked like glass. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about theories or equations. He was thinking about her. Who was Maya Williams? How could a janitor solve problems that only experts knew? And why did she work here, cleaning classrooms, when she clearly belonged at the front of one? The next morning, he decided to find out. When Maya entered the math building with her usual calm smile, Professor Smith was already waiting. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice softer this time. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Maya looked surprised but nodded. They sat on a bench near the window. Outside, students hurried to class carrying laptops and coffee cups. Inside, there was only silence between them. After a moment, he said, "You're gifted. I've seen your work. That's not something a person learns by accident. You studied mathematics, didn't you?" Maya smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "Once," she said, "a long time ago." Professor Smith leaned forward. "Tell me." She took a deep breath, her voice calm but filled with old pain. "I was born in the south side of the city," she began. My mom worked in a small diner and my dad was a mechanic. We didn't have much, but I loved learning. Especially numbers. They made sense when life didn't. She smiled at the memory. When I was 16, my teacher entered me in a state math competition. I won. It was the best day of my life. Everyone thought I'd go far. I got a scholarship to study mathematics at Ridgewell University. The professor listened quietly. Maya's voice was soft, but every word felt heavy with truth. But then she continued. Life changed. My mother got sick, very sick. I tried to study and work at the same time, but it wasn't enough. When she passed away, my dad couldn't pay the bills. I had to leave school. Her hands tightened slightly. I told myself I'd go back one day, but one day turned into 1 year, and then 10. Professor Smith didn't interrupt. He could feel the ache behind her calm tone. I took any job I could find. Supermarkets, cafes, cleaning houses. Eventually, I got this one at the university. At first, I thought it would hurt watching students chase the same dream I lost. But then I found peace in it. I had time. I had access to books. I could read again. I started solving problems after hours just for fun. She laughed softly. I used to think no one would ever see those equations. They were my secret friends. Professor Smith's eyes softened. You mean to tell me, he said quietly, that while you were cleaning classrooms, you were still studying calculus for yourself? Yes, Maya said. I never stopped. I couldn't. Math makes me feel ... alive. It's like music in my mind. He looked down, ashamed. In all this time, I treated you like you didn't belong here. Akwana gave a small smile. You're not the first, Professor. People see what they expect. A uniform, a broom, a brown face, they make their own story. But I learned not to hate them. Everyone carries their own walls. For a moment, there was silence again. Only the hum of the hallway lights filled the air. Professor Smith finally spoke, his voice trembling. You belong in a classroom, Maya, not outside it. She looked at him kindly. Maybe, but I'm not sure how to start again. He stood up, determination in his eyes. Then let me help you. Maya blinked in surprise. Help me, he nodded. You've reminded me what real learning looks like. I won't let your talent go unseen. As Maya returned to her cleaning cart. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness this time, but with hope, and for the first time in his career. Professor Smith didn't feel like a teacher above others. He felt like a student again, learning something far greater than math, humility. For the next few days, Professor Smith felt like a man walking through fog. Everywhere he went, people whispered about Maya Williams, the janitor who solved the impossible equation. He heard her name in the cafeteria, the library, even from other professors in hushed conversations. Each time, his chest tightened with guilt. He had spent his life teaching others to think clearly. Yet his own mind had been clouded by pride. Now that fog was lifting, and what he saw made him ashamed. That Monday morning, stood in front of his class, holding a piece of chalk that suddenly felt heavy. He looked at his students' young, curious faces, full of questions. For the first time, he wondered what they truly learned from him. Had he taught them math or arrogance? He put the chalk down. Class dismissed, he said quietly. The students looked confused, but they left. He needed time. Time to fix something far more important than an equation. Later that day, he found Maya near the courtyard, sweeping fallen leaves. She was humming softly to herself. When she saw him, she straightened a little, unsure what to expect. Good morning, Professor, she said politely. Good morning, he replied. His voice was calm, but there was a weight behind it. I owe you an apology. Maya blinked, surprised. For what? For everything, he said. For doubting you. For mocking you. For forgetting that genius has nothing to do with titles or clothes. Maya smiled kindly. It's all right, Professor. I never held it against you. But Smith shook his head. It's not all right. You deserve more than an apology. You deserve an opportunity. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a letter stamped with the official seal of the university. I spoke with the dean, he explained. There's a research fellowship starting next month, open to anyone with exceptional skill, even without a formal degree. I told them about you. I showed them your work." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope. Her eyes filled with disbelief. "You did this? For me?" Smith nodded slowly. "It's the least I could do. You reminded me what real talent looks like, what real humility feels like." For a moment, she said nothing. The breeze rustled the trees. A few leaves fell to her feet. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "It's been so long since I sat in a real classroom." Smith smiled gently. "Then start where you left off. You'll find your way back faster than you think. You have something most people lose along the way: curiosity." A small laugh escaped her. "And a mop," she added. He laughed too. "Keep it," he said. "It's part of your story now." Over the next few weeks, Maya began attending evening sessions in the math department. At first, she sat quietly at the back, taking notes while still working her cleaning shifts during the day. But soon students began asking her for help. Her calm explanations, her patience, her way of seeing patterns, it all drew them in. One evening, Smith passed by her classroom and watched from the doorway. She was standing near the board, solving a problem, while a small group of students gathered around her. Her voice was steady, her eyes bright. She looked exactly where she belonged. After class, Smith waited for her outside. "You were brilliant in there," he said. Maya smiled. "I just explained it the way I understand it." "That's what good teachers do," he replied softly. For a long moment, they stood in comfortable silence. Then Smith said, "Maya, thank you." "For what?" "For teaching me." That night, as he walked home through the quiet campus, Professor Smith looked up at the stars. He realized something simple yet powerful. Mathematics was never about being superior. It was about discovering truth. And truth could come from anyone, anywhere, the next day. He placed a small note on his office door. "Every mind matters. Every question deserves respect." Beneath it, in smaller letters, A.S. Months passed quietly at Westbridge University. But something subtle had changed. People spoke differently now. The story of Maya Williams, the janitor who solved the impossible equation, had become almost a legend on campus. Students who once walked past her without a glance now smiled and said, "Good morning." Professors nodded with respect. Even the dean, who rarely noticed anyone outside his office, made sure her name was printed in the faculty newsletter. Maya, however, stayed the same, humble, calm, and focused. She still arrived early, still carried her mop, and still cleaned the rooms before dawn. But now, after her shift, she attended research seminars. Her notebooks were filled not with cleaning schedules, but with formulas, graphs, and dreams. One afternoon, Professor Smith entered the small seminar hall where Maya was working on a paper. Her desk was scattered with notes, her pencil moving fast. He stood at the door, watching silently. The same woman he had once underestimated was now writing theories that even he found fascinating. He smiled. "Maya," he said softly, "do you realize your work on infinite sequences could change the way we teach calculus?" She looked up, almost embarrassed. "I just followed the numbers," she said. "They always lead somewhere," he chuckled. "Yes, but most people never dare to follow them this far." A few weeks later came a letter that would change everything. Maya was invited to present her research at the International Mathematics Conference in Boston. Her paper, The Harmony of Patterns in Infinite Series, had been selected among hundreds from across the world. When she read the letter, she sat down slowly, her heart racing. Her name, Maya Williams, printed next to words she had only ever dreamed of. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Mom, we made it." The day of the conference arrived. The grand hall was full of scholars, scientists, and mathematicians. Lights shone on a tall stage with a single podium. Behind it, the giant screen read, "Keynote speaker, Maya Williams, Westbridge University." Professor Smith sat in the front row. His hands folded, his chest tight with pride. When Maya walked onto the stage, wearing a simple navy suit and her old silver watch, the audience applauded warmly. She took a deep breath, looked around, and smiled. "Good morning," she began. My name is Maya Williams. Some of you may know me from a little story that went around the internet a while ago. Yes, I was a janitor. And yes, I love math. A gentle laugh rolled through the crowd. But today, she continued, I'm not here to talk about my job. I'm here to talk about curiosity, the one thing that connects every human being. Curiosity doesn't care about your uniform, your color, or your degree. It only asks one question. Will you keep searching? Her voice was calm but full of fire. She explained her research with clarity and heart, turning numbers into poetry. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. The applause lasted several minutes. Professor Smith felt tears gather in his eyes. He had never felt prouder, not even of his own work. Later, as Maya stepped down from the stage, he met her halfway. You were magnificent, he said. She smiled. You taught me to believe again, Professor. He shook his head. No, Maya, you taught me. And for a brief moment, teacher and student, janitor and scholar, were simply two souls who loved the same truth. That evening, as the sun set outside the conference hall, Maya stood by the window. Her reflection glowed in the orange light. She wasn't thinking of fame or recognition, only of how far she had come from those quiet mornings with her mop and the whiteboard. Behind her, Professor Smith's words echoed in her mind, every mind matters. Every question deserves respect. She smiled and whispered to herself. I guess he was right. The camera would slowly fade out on her face, eyes bright with purpose, as a soft voiceover said, never judge someone by the job they do. Genius can live anywhere, even behind a broom.